Listeners, welcome to the show and welcome back to the Business Method Podcast. Today, we're glad to have you. I'm excited for today's guest. We have Erik Qualman on the show, also known as Equalman. Equalman, Eric, started out working at Yahoo way back in the day. He's a Forbes top 50 influencer. He's a 5-time #1 international best-selling author and speaker. His books include The Focus Project, What Happens in Vegas Stays on YouTube, which sounds exciting. I want to check that book out. What Happens on Campus Stays on YouTube, Digital Leader, Socialnomics, and How to Sell on LinkedIn. From his book, Digital Leader, he was voted the second most likable author after J.K. Rowling from the Harry Potter series. He's an international motivational speaker. He's spoken in over 55 different countries. His socialnomics work has been on 60 Minutes to the Wall Street Journal and used by the National Guard to NASA. He has over 500 universities using his materials. He's a former sitting professor at MIT and Harvard's edX lab, and he's received an honorary doctorate for his groundbreaking work. His studios, Eagleman Studios, produces from A to Z award-winning movies for Fortune 1000 companies, small businesses, and nonprofits. He's on the podcast today. Eric, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Doing well, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Good. It's great to have you. We were introduced through Dave Williams, which is a longtime friend of both of ours, and he's the founder of the Nomad X community, an occasional sponsor of the podcast. And so glad to finally meet you because I think we tried to get you on the show and went back and forth with scheduling for a while, for maybe a year or so, but we finally got you on the show. So, and you're in the same city I am in, Austin, and just down the road from what I hear. So how's life?
Life's good, no complaints, and we're living in Austin, which is a good place to be during all of this craziness. And so I can't wait to get together with you as well in person.
Yeah, even though there's a lot of craziness going on in Austin, it's still a good place to be, comparable to a lot of places in the world. So we're very fortunate for sure. Eric, I'm always curious. Like, I love personal brands. I love learning the science and business models behind personal brands and how they evolve to that. And you kind of notice two different types of personal brands that come up. We have personal brands that come from somebody that's created an immense amount of success and they have to just become a personal brand. So you think a sports athlete or a very successful entrepreneur, and like almost society or the world is saying, you, now that you've had all this success, you have to be a personal brand. And then you have people that start out from ground zero as a personal brand. And I'm just kind of curious, did you, when you started out back in the day working at Yahoo, did you always know that you wanted to be a personal brand, or was it after like a certain amount of success that you know, finally the world was like, we need Eric, we need Equalman, form your own personal brand? How did it evolve for you?
More the accidental approach. And even in my career, when I started off, I don't even think they had the term personal brand, to be honest. They probably used the term reputation. And so, it was all, I worked at Yahoo, worked at big companies like General Motors, AT&T, and then worked at a smaller company's head of marketing at Travel Zoo. That company went from private to public. So a little different path. That's what I always tell people, because you'll hear some talking heads say, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you'd only be an entrepreneur. That's definitely not true. I can go down the list, starting with myself, of people that actually started kind of quote unquote on a general path and then decided to go down this different path. So definitely by accident. And then after the first book, Socialnomics, then realized over time that people, even though I'm from the Midwest, you know, you're originally from the Midwest, is that it's kind of in our DNA not to be like me, look at me. So it's very difficult for me and a lot of people probably out there to have a personal brand. But then when you flip it, the way that I'm able to handle it is, the reason I have a personal brand is so I can help people. Yeah. So once you flip it and go, if I wear these crazy green glasses, it's worth that discomfort if I can help one other person. Yeah. And so for a lot of you listeners that are kind of like, I don't want a personal brand, if you flip it like I have and understand that mindset, it's part of it is really just so you can help more people.
Yeah. There's so many people out there and very successful entrepreneurs that are kind of timid, like people that have built 8-figure businesses, and I'm sure you've met them, Eric, that are timid to build or to create a personal brand, because then they think they're going to be titled like a fake guru or something like that, you know? And so, but when you start to kind of dissect the science of a personal brand and why they're needed in society today, then it really kind of makes sense. And we all have a personal brand in our own right, whether we realize we're building it or not. And you said it perfectly. You said back in the day, it was just reputation, and your reputation is your personal brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for the listeners, you can't see this, but for the video, those watching the video, Eric's got some bright green glasses on and he wears them all the time. And that's part of his personal brand. And is that like your alter ego? Like you put those on and you're like, okay, I'm Equalman now.
Yeah, it kind of helps if you're going on stage. You're like, all right, let's just take a deep breath, put these on, and now you're Equalman. But I'm wearing them more and more. I almost wear them all the time now. So that's been not somewhat, it's very uncomfortable, but over time you kind of learn to live with it. But it comes up more than you think. And so if we want to, I get into the story of why I wear these green glasses. But it even came into fruition at the gym the other day because this guy that works at my daughter's school said, and I had a mask on, and he's like, I wouldn't have recognized you without your green glasses. And so it comes in the little nuances where it helps more than you think.
Yeah, it's kind of like Bono from U2. He does the same thing. Like he always wears glasses, but I think it's so he's not recognized not wearing glasses in public eye. And it can work in your favor too. But what sparked it? What started it?
So if you look at my name, Erik Qualman, it's just first initial, last name's Equalman. So whenever you give your email address, it's always Equalman. So I've always been Equalman, and I didn't like it at first, and part of the reason I'm going to tell the audience this story is because I do think we're all living the same movie. We're just different actors within that movie. And so it'll be resonate with all of you, just how to step fully into your story and don't do what I did, which is really, I resisted my story for 15 years because it's uncomfortable. And so I didn't like the name Equalman. Like you mentioned, I was at Yahoo. People might say, hey, we need someone to work the weekend. Well, Equalman's got super strength. He must have super strength because he's got that superhero name. He can work the weekend. Hey, we're running out of food for this meeting with the client. Well, who's the fastest here? It's probably Equalman. He's got that super fast speed. So all good-natured stuff, but I actually didn't like it. And then after 15 years, something happened for me. And then I realized, wait, this name is happening not to me, but it's happening for me.
Yeah.
And what happened was I went to do an interview for a magazine. They wanted to take a photo for the cover, and they're talking about my books. And so they go, hey, you've got a unique moniker. We want to have some fun with this cover. Do you mind if you wear some Superman-like Clark Kent glasses? And I said, yeah, we can do that. And they go, it's our St. Patrick's Day issue. Do you mind if they're green? And I go, yeah, I mean, I went to Michigan State. Green's great, bring it out.
Okay.
They bring them out. I'm like, whoa, those are really bright. But we have some fun with that shoot. And then a couple weeks later, I fly to Kenya to give a keynote speech. The night before I'm going to give that talk, I went to a rescue shelter to adopt a baby cheetah. Not to take home, my wife would kill me, but just to kind of support the local area. And I know you travel a ton. It's just a better way to figure out, what that country and that culture's all about to kind of get out there into it. And on the way over, the lady that I'm with said, hey, the Olympic sprinter Usain Bolt adopted from the same litter of cheetah that you're going to adopt from. And he was here a couple days ago. We took photos and video of him. We'd love to do the same if you don't mind and kind of marry that together. We can raise more money for the shelter. I go, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I'm happy to do whatever it takes. And then she kind of pauses and she looks at me and says, but of course, when we're filming and shooting, we want to make sure you're wearing your green glasses.
Oh, wow.
And I look back at her and go, I don't wear those all the time. I look ridiculous walking around wearing green glasses all the time. And the look on her face, I never wanted to see that again. And it kind of hit me over the head like a 2x4 to realize, wait, this is not happening to you. It's actually happening for you.
Right.
And it's crazy as a marketer that it took me so long to realize, wait, this is a way to differentiate. This is a way that if one other person could recognize you, that helps get our message out there, that helps empower them, then it's worth that discomfort to fully walk into that discomfort. So it's a long way to say, not only is my cheetah much faster than Usain Bolt's cheetah, but it's a long way to say that Your story, a lot of you listeners out there, some of you stepped into your story, but you haven't stepped into the biggest chapter.
Ooh.
And that's absolutely normal, because that biggest chapter is actually walking in discomfort. It's kind of just making sure you step into that fear with your own personal story. And so I hope that helps everyone out there. I know it's helped me a lot, and it's helped our career. And understand discomfort means that at the beginning, and even to this day, we won't get booked for deals because, say, a business goes, well, we need someone more serious. What's up with the green glasses? Mm-hmm. But we make a lot more deals because people are like, yeah, let's have some fun. Let's give them to the audience. We actually now are in the business of producing these glasses by the thousands at these large conferences that put the logo on the side. So it's been a long journey. It's been a fun ride. There's stuff that you never think of as an entrepreneur that can happen. And so hopefully it helps all the listeners out there.
Do you tell people, if you're feeling down or you're feeling like afraid, just put on your glasses and then you become, super equal man afterwards, or woman?
Yeah, well, I'll tell the audience when they hand them out, I'll go, hey, my hope is that a week from now, 2 weeks from now, most of you, if you have kids, you're going to give them to your kids because they love these things.
Yeah.
But even if you're not wearing them, my hope is at some point you look over and you see them, and it's a reminder, it's a physical reminder, hey, am I walking in discomfort? And a lot of that discomfort is, am I doing the one thing that I'm supposed to be doing right now? Because sometimes we avoid that throughout the day because it is probably the hardest thing we need to do.
Yeah.
And so that's part of walking in discomfort as well, as tackling that hard thing we don't want to do. And so my hope is either look at them, or some of you rock them out, put them on, and make it happen. When we're in the audience, though, I'll actually tell people to put them on just so they can get a sense. I go, some of you are going to feel silly. You don't want to put these on, and then they'll put them on, and then the CEO starts laughing, smiling. So it's often that first step that's the hardest.
Is it a sort of an alter ego for you? Oh, you even have a green straw for your drink. That's cool. Is it, Eric, is it alter ego? So, and I'm asking because I have a good friend who's one of the top rodeo entertainers in the world, and he has an alter ego, and his alter ego, so he has a stage name, he's got his real name, right? And he's got his alter ego personality. And his alter ego personality is like this guy named John Jack, which is like kind of a John Wayne type of cowboy. Like whenever he's afraid or whenever he's scared to go out in front of a new audience, or have a new rodeo that's bigger than he's ever done before, then he's like, what would John Jack do? And John Jack never has any hesitation. Like John Jack is always on top of it. So even though he's 40, he's still going back to this boyhood type of alter ego that says, what would the most fearless cowboy in the world, John Jack, do? And he would hop on the bull and he would go out there and ride out and entertain the crowd. So is it kind of like that for you? Do you feel different when you have them on as opposed to when you have them off?
I definitely feel a little different, but now I'm wearing them so often, but just making sure when I look in the mirror and I have them on, or sometimes it's just literally, sometimes my wife will go, we're having a dinner meeting, or just meeting some folks from dinner. She's trying to probably impress them, whatever it might be. She goes, you really wearing the green glasses? But like, come on, I'm already feeling uncomfortable about these things as it is. Yeah. No, but over time, you just learn to walk in that discomfort. I think the one thing that, I wouldn't say it's an alter ego, but I think people will be surprised, whether it's in an interview like this or I'm on stage, is that you're on stage, it's like, hey, you got an hour, go. Oh, you got 3 hours, you got to go. And you're talking the whole time. Once I'm off stage, part of it's decompression, and this is true for a lot of folks that are out there, quote unquote, in the public spotlight, is that they're probably a lot more introverted and quiet than you think off the stage. Yeah. And so you definitely want to sit by my wife at a dinner party, not me, unless I'm a really good listener. So some people love that. Most people do love that. But once I'm off stage, I'm a little more quiet and reserved than most people would think.
So you have an incredible amount of very impressive accolades. And I'm curious, you started out in the corporate world, Eric. When was the shift to, hey, I'm going to be a personal brand, I'm going to be an inspirational speaker, I'm going to write books? Like when was the transition?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of gradual, to be honest. I mean, most stories you'll hear, it's like black and white, I woke up, can't do this anymore, throw it out, go forward. And so I'm always trying to help those listeners, a lot of your audience probably out there as well, is actually the hardest time to transition is when you enjoy what you do. So I always had good jobs. I liked what I did. And so that's the hardest way to transition. The easy thing is like, I hate my boss. I hate my job. It's like, then quit, do the other thing. That's the easy one.
Yeah.
It's when you're like, I like what I do. I've got a family I got to support. It's good money. That's the harder transition. So for me, I was in the corporate side of things, again, big and small companies. And then I wrote the book Socialnomics.
What year was that?
Sorry, go ahead.
What year was that, Eric?
2010 is when it was published.
Okay.
I wrote it in 2008, 2009. I think it was published. It might have been 2009 it was published.
Okay.
But that book comes out, and it really changed my world. So it's still, I had a big team running digital for a large international company. It was privately held, but it's in 50 countries, 30,000 employees.
Okay.
So I was literally taking vacation days to fly to Brazil. I remember flying to Porto Alegre to give a talk and then flying back immediately. Like I'd be in these countries for like 5 hours because I'm taking vacation days.
Oh, wow.
And then come back and have to deal with my team who are amazing. The owner of the company is awesome. And so finally I just said, look, I had to go in and go, look, I love what I do. I love the mission of this educational company that I work for, but I gotta do this. Like this is an opportunity that's kind of come out of nowhere from the book. And I didn't realize you can help. I think I can help more people doing it this way.
Right.
And so fortunately they said, all right, let's cut your team. Let's cut your salary in half. We'll give you benefits, which is important for me because I had, baby on the way. But let's just have you sit here as a coach / consultant within the organization. I go, great, because I love the mission. I want to help. And so we did that for 4 years. And then eventually it just made sense for me to just completely do this full time on all fronts.
Yeah.
And so that was the transition. The reason I went deep in that is because I think a lot of your listeners out there, again, if you hate your job and like don't even want to get up, that's easy. Just quit. Go to the next thing, take that leap. But if you're like I am, it's a little more difficult. There are different paths you can do. Figure out, like I did, go in and straddle it. Go into that meeting knowing that they could say, have a nice life. But I went to that meeting to the owner of the company and said, hey, I'd love to figure out some way for me to still be involved.
Yeah.
I just can't manage my team, and it'll be a disservice to the company and to my team and to you if I kept doing what I'm doing, going down this path. I'm just exhausted.
Yeah.
And so figure out there's more in the middle than you think. There's always room for that negotiation to figure out what works for all parties.
That's great because a lot of times the cliche story is I hated my job. I had an idea. I made the leap. I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I made the leap and then I found some sort of success, And, I don't know when you were younger if you felt like you wanted to be an entrepreneur, but it was kind of like an evolution. You wanted to write a book, you wrote the book, and then all of a sudden you had the success from the book. The world was telling you, Eric, we need you to be a personal brand. And then you kind of stepped into it. But it was a little transition for you. It wasn't like cut and dry and burning the bridges behind you. It's like, oh, let's ease into this and see how it works. Because there's all different paths.
Yeah, and I go over that a little bit in the book, The Focus Project, with the guys that started Warby Parker, the glasses company. They were at Wharton, then they took high-paying consulting jobs, and a peer of mine, Adam Grant, also great books like Give and Take. You should check out his stuff, all you listeners out there. But he's a professor at Wharton, and these are some of his students. And they try to get him to invest in the company. And he goes, are you full-time on this? They're like, no, it's like our side hustle. He goes, well, I'm not investing in more. If it's not your full-time gig, I'm not going to invest in it. And so I go into a couple stories where you can straddle it. It's like that side hustle, and then you kind of go into that. Obviously, the more glorified stories are burn the bridges, cut it off. Everyone has their own path.
Yeah.
And so just figure out what's the best path for you. And it's funny you mentioned entrepreneurship. Literally, at the University of Texas, I took an entrepreneur class. I didn't even know what that word meant.
Yeah.
Like it was the first time they'd started the entrepreneur class, and someone said, the person I was talking to, the student goes, yeah, I don't even know what it is, but you got to take this, whatever that guy teaches, he's really good.
Yeah.
And so I go, all right, I'll take it. And so literally that explosion the last 2 decades in entrepreneurship. So I'm just I didn't think I was going to write a book. That was never write a business book. That was never on the radar. And so it's really just kind of enjoying the journey, right? Enjoying that moment. And then you'll look back and go, wow, that was crazy how I got here.
So while you were still working, so you put the book out, it became pretty successful. Was it, it was a bestseller on international bestseller also?
It was, yeah. Socialnomics, kind of exploded. And then a video I did with it went massively viral.
Okay. And then you got invited to do speaking gigs, right? Speaking engagements. And your first one you got, were you surprised? And were you like, I don't know how much to charge for this? Or did you do it for free? What was that process like for you, Eric?
Definitely did the first couple for free. And just to kind of backtrack a little bit, I was the head of marketing at Travelzoo. So I was speaking.
Okay.
So I have a tendency to mumble. You might hear it during this interview.
Okay.
And so I would take Toastmasters in graduate school. Like I took it mainly so I could communicate better with my friends. Like they jokingly make fun of me, my voice and just how I mumbled. So I got to get this thing under control.
Okay.
And so did that. And then at Travelzoo, the founder of Travelzoo is German. And so English is not his first language. And so part of my role was baptism by fire, is that I would go with him to Wall Street, to the press, to kind of be another voice. And so looking back, that was a huge help for me. Yeah. It was very daunting at the time because it was all new to me. But when I wrote the book Socialnomics, they put me in this book expo, which is large, it's the biggest book fair for launching books. So the publisher said, hey, we need you to go speak on this. So before I went to that book fair, though, just the impetus for Socialnomics itself, we were spending about $50 million a year on search at Travelzoo, which at the time was a lot. That might not be a lot now, but it's a lot. And so at these search conferences, search was the biggest thing. And I started talking about social media, and people were like, what are you doing? Like, people want you to talk about search. This is a search conference. Search is big. Social media is like this teenage thing. It's not a business thing. And so I go, wow, these people, I was frustrated. I go, they don't see it. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, they don't see it. And then my buddy goes, hey, go talk to our publisher. And I'd been rejected for fiction books, like 100 rejection letters. So I know how hard it was to get published. And so I was going to meet the publisher, but I had to go to this other conference where I was going to hear Tony Blair speak for the company. So I had to go to this for this company. But the way it came up, I didn't mean it, but when I was at this interview for 20 minutes, just grabbing a quick coffee with the publisher, I said, I hate to do this, but I got to run. I got to go to this meeting with Tony Blair. But it sounded like I was like meeting with Tony Blair. I don't know if that helped get the deal, but all of a sudden we signed a deal. They love the name Socialnomics. And so wrote that book. And then they had me go to that book expo. So it's crazy. I'm like, this is crazy. I'm like sitting next to Julie Andrews, like my mom's favorite actress. And I had my mom up for a mom's weekend, just happenstance in New York. So she got to see it and she's like, thought it was really cool. And but I got up on stage and I spoke, and I got off stage and there's a guy there that said, hey, I don't know what you do for a living, but you should speak for a living. Yeah. I go, you can do that? And then, so the first couple deals to your question is they were free. And then I got excited when someone paid, a friend at a company said, hey, I need you to speak. I'll pay for your airfare and pay for your hotel. I'm like, this is great.
Free travel.
Free trip. This is awesome. And then all of a sudden you start talking to a lot of mentors along the way, whether it's Seth Godin, whether it's Guy Kawasaki. They're like, you should charge this. I'm like, what? Yeah. Are you crazy? They're like, yeah, just throw it out there. And I'm like, wow, okay. And then you start to get paid to speak, and then this is amazing. I love doing this. I love helping people, and you're getting paid for it. Win-win.
What was the first amount that you charged somebody, Eric?
So the first amount was like just, hey, pick up the room and the board, pick up the travel. And then the first one was $5,000, and then it quickly ratcheted to $10,000. And then you're in that space, like then when you move up to 15, there's different tiers in the speaking world. Right. And then 15 to 20 for quite some time. And then there's an epiphany for me as I realized I was speaking very technical social media items, very technical. Okay. I started watching some of the top keynote speakers, because I normally was like the second person or third person.
Yeah.
And I'd listen to them and I'd go, well, who doesn't know what they just said? I mean, I'm like, everyone knows that.
Right.
And then I realized, wait. A, not everyone knows it. And B, these guys are geniuses because they know what the audience wants to hear. Mm. And so it's like a curse of knowledge to realize, hey, you know, if you want to be the keynote speaker, it needs to be a little higher level and more inspirational, motivational, something that talks to the heart and the brain, not just to the brain.
Right.
And so if you're caught in those breakout sessions more like I was, which was more to the brain, once you figure out it's more my DNA to talk to the heart. Mm-hmm. And so it's actually an easier transition. I enjoyed it a lot more to do that. And then ironically enough, that puts you as the keynote, like the number one person.
Yeah.
And so then you jump up to that 30 to 50,000. International gets a little more, but then it jumps up to that larger dollar range as well as a speaker.
In your busiest year, how many speaking engagements did you have?
The busiest year, I have guardrails, so it'll only be 52 nights away from the kids.
Okay.
And so you can do, especially I won't talk about virtual, but before virtual, is you can do a couple in a day, depending on the city location, the flights, and the one time. But anyways, the short answer is 75, but that's unusual because then we put the guardrails in place. I know people that do hundreds, and I don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
I know a speaker that most of you guys would know, and they actually fractured their back just from the travel. Like just sitting on the plane that much, they actually had a hairline stress fracture in their back.
Wow.
And with the young kids, I just didn't want to do that. So we have the guardrail 52 nights away from the kids in a year. Mm-hmm. And that's great. It's helped the revenue even because then you just increase your fee because you have less days to actually be out there. But it's been a great journey. That's just something for me. Anyone that wants to do the 150 speeches a year, knock yourself out. It's just not for me and my lifestyle with the family.
Yeah, I have a friend who does 200 a year pre-COVID. Yeah. And but he has a wife and no children, and you know him and his wife are on the same page with it, and a lot of times they travel together. So yeah, but that's crazy. I like your policy, like 52 days a year away from the kids. You know, then you get 300 or so with the kids. Like that makes sense. That's good boundaries. Yeah.
Now my wife and I, don't get us wrong, we're trying to, if we can be fortunate to do this, we'll have to be relevant 10 years from now, which will be very difficult to do. But if we are, then that's just the greatest thing because then we'll just travel everywhere together, just city to city to city.
Yeah. So you have, so 2 revenue sources, the books and then speaking engagements. And then you also have Eagleman Studios. Is that still going? And you produce videos, award-winning movies for Fortune 1000 companies, small businesses, and nonprofits around the world. When did that actually? What was your third? I guess your next. Was that the next revenue stream for your personal brand, your company?
It is, yeah. So we did a video, or I did a video for Socialnomics, the book, because I talked to people for, let's say, a CEO for an hour, and they go, yeah, that makes sense. We should probably do that. They're like, that's great. That's really interesting. They wouldn't do anything.
Right.
I'm like, oh, man, I got to up this. So I go, let me grab some data. That speaks, louder than words. It's like Google likes to say, trust in God, everyone else bring data.
Okay, yeah.
And so I did this, at the time it was crazy because I think it was 4 to 5 minutes, just like marrying data into a story of why social media was for business, for politics, government, changed the way everything. It's called Social Media Revolution because it's revolutionizing the way we communicate. Easy for us to see now, but at the time it's like, what? That's just teenage stuff. Like they're just screwing around. This thing's going to go away.
Right.
And so that video went massively viral. And literally companies would call me and go, hey, because we used some new technology at the time to make some cool like kinetic motion graphics. And they call me and go, hey, can you do that for us? I go, no, I just do that. I just did that for myself. And then like the second company calls, hey, can you make a video for us? I go, no, I just did that, for the book. Then like your audience is listening going, this guy's not too bright. Like, why doesn't he move faster? Then the third knock. So don't do what I did because you're not going to get that third knock often. But I got the third knock and then we go, yeah, we've got we'll make it happen. So then that was the birth of the studio. And then we've been lucky. I mean, we work with small companies, large companies. I'll mention the large companies because most people won't know the small names, but we've done animation for usually 2 to 3 minute videos. Now they're 90 seconds to 2 minutes, but for Disney, for Oreo, Cartier, Mont Blanc. So it's fun, it's storytelling through animation.
Nice. And so you wrote the book in 2010, right? Socialnomics. And then you started your speaking engagement, your engagements. And when did you start Eagleman Studios?
Eagleman Studios started in 2011.
Okay, so that went pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And that's cool. And so then do you have any other revenue sources for your personal brand, or is those three the primary ones still to the day?
No, the one that I'm proudest of, because I'm not involved with it anymore. So this is all to the team, and we've got a very, very tiny team. But is socialnomics.com or socialnomics.net.
Okay.
We own both the URLs, but that was a blog I started with the book.
Okay.
So I used to just personally write the blog, and then over time, because of time, constraints, then we flipped the model to be more the Huffington Post model. So we had people that wanted to contribute. And so we'd have writers. Now we have over 100 writers from 13 countries that write for Socialnomics.
Wow.
And then there's an ad-supported model with that. So that is the only revenue that I've ever been able to create that's kind of like that mailbox, aside from royalties from the book, because once you write a book, that's kind of mailbox money that's coming in.
Right.
That you're not putting any time toward anymore.
Right.
And so hats off to my team that have taken this to a new level. And it was one of those roller coasters where once I came off Socialnomics, the views went down. We hadn't monetized it at that point. And so the views are going down. And so then they took it to a whole new level. And the writers, it's been amazing.
Yeah. So that's a good topic to talk about, because a lot of personal brands, when they say the personal brand or the person of the personal brand stopped working or just decided to go on sabbatical, a lot of times their revenue or their personal brand kind of diminishes or fades away. And so it sounds like when you had Socialnomics originally and you stopped working on it, then it started to slow down. But then you decided, what made you decide to create a company around that or a blog around that, and then build a team around that so it could be continual monthly income coming in with you there or without you there?
Yeah, almost anything that I do starts kind of with me as an audience member.
Okay.
So I'll say, well, I want to read this.
Okay.
And so for Socialnomics, I go, well, there's a lot of smart people out there. 100 people is going to be better than me. And they're going to be the experts on XYZ, you name it, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. And so I want to read what their knowledge is. And so that's how almost any project I do starts, is that I want it.
Okay.
And so at least I have and Tim Ferriss talks about this, you have an audience of one.
Yeah.
So at least you have a minimum audience of one, you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how our podcast started too. I wanted a certain content when I was at the gym. So I go, let's produce that so that at least I have it. And if I want it, there's probably other people who want it. And so again, a lot of people talk about that, but I really buy into that. And so this will be helpful for your audience, I think, especially with what they do. And, a lot of them are nomads and a lot of them are digital savants, digital leaders. So obviously what you just mentioned is completely true. I go, well, what happens if whatever, name it. You can say, get hit by the bus, win the lottery. I don't exist. And a good example to always look at is Walt Disney. So Disney's still here inspiring people long after Walt Disney's gone. But it all started Walt Disney. It's named after his last name, right? And so I was like, well, we got to get different revenue streams that don't involve me. And so we map out 4 Ps, right? There's performances, me on stage. There's production, that's the studio piece. There's publishing, that's the book piece, and also the Socialnomics, that's the blog piece. Okay. Then there's partnerships. Partnerships can be coaching, they can be me as an influencer. Still, a lot of them involve me, but it's like diversifying that revenue stream from just me giving keynotes on stage.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to do because you cannot beat the margin or the fun of giving a keynote speech. Mm-hmm. But we did that, and what happens is all of a sudden our keynotes go down because what are we doing? Our focus is on these 4 pillars we're trying to build. So then for 2 years, all of a sudden we're looking at our keynotes are down because we're not focused on that. Okay, let's pause. And this is when the focus project gets going, the book. We pause that, and then immediately the keynotes take off. Mm-hmm. But the beautiful thing is when the pandemic hits, since we'd put all those time into those 4 pillars, all of a sudden more people are digesting content online. They're digesting podcasts. All of a sudden, because you put in that time, it was worth it. And so hopefully that's helpful for all you folks out there. The other thing I learned is that you got to figure out what your strength is. So I'm sitting there going, I want to scale this, but I realize that that's not my strength. Mm-hmm. Now to scale this, if we really want to scale it, I have to hire like a COO or a president, that is their strength. And so you can take different models on how you go about doing it. So I realized that I'm more of a J.K. Rowling model. If it were to scale, someone else is going to help me scale it. Okay. Meaning that she wrote those books, and then along comes the Universal Studios, and they build the park. They make the movies. And so that's how she got to that scale. It wasn't her driving that scale. That wasn't her strength. And I quickly realized that's not my strength as well, to manage probably whatever, name your 10,000 people, whatever it might be. And so hopefully that's helpful for all your entrepreneurs out there, is that there's, in my mind, there's a lot of different paths, but there's 2 major paths on how you get to scale. It's like, that's in your DNA. That's what you do well. It's not what I do well. I'm not an operator. Or it's in someone else's DNA, and then you're more, quote unquote, the artist, the salesperson, whatever that might be, that's your strength, and then you combine those 2 forces.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really cool. You talk about this in your book, The Focus Project, but you hear this from every entrepreneur. Focus on one thing, build it, get it to a point. Focus on the next thing, build it, get it to a point. It sounds like that you did that from time to time, but you also had numerous things going on. That it seems like, does your attention have to jump from project to project, or was it like, oh, I'm focused on this book now, everything else is off the calendar, and then I'm going to focus on the next thing, then I'm going to focus on the Socialnomics blog? How's that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I always say you got to deal in reality. And so when I'm talking about the Focus Project, the book, and more and more I'm keynoting on the Focus Project, I always tell everyone on stage, I go, look, I'm a work in progress. Yeah. So I am sharing my learnings with you. All of you are different on how you attack this. And so you got to know where your strengths lie, where your weaknesses lie. And that's why I say in the book, there's 4 basically focus animals. And it'll be interesting. I'm going to ask you which animal you are.
Yes.
So I'll go over it at super high level. So you've got an army ant. The army ant can parallel process. So an army ant can carry basically 10,000 times their weight, but that doesn't mean they should, because they get back to the anthill and they can't there's a certain circumference of that anthill. They can't get all this stuff in there.
Or they have a fracture in their spine.
There's a fracture in their spine. But there's the folks that won't fracture their spine, that can carry the load. But that doesn't mean they should. Just because you can doesn't mean that you should. So that's the army ant. You're parallel processing like 5 to 8 projects when you should be probably at most 1 to 2.
Yeah.
And then you've got the hedgehog, and all of these are strong. They're all strengths, right? If you look at the hedgehog, this is more probably the lawyer at the company. Okay. They're more likely to be like, hey, I want to write a book, but in order to write a book, I got to get my PhD in book writing. So they think they have to get all these skills before they actually hit the go button. But they're very helpful because they might be in the meeting and go, I don't know if we should move all of our extra capital to buy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so that's the hedgehog. Then if you look at the chameleon's a people pleaser. And so that's a good thing, right? They're really good emotional intelligence. They're putting others' needs first. The key is it becomes a detriment when you go to that extreme where you never put your needs first. Yeah. And so you think about that airline passenger, they say put your mask on first before your child's. And so it's making sure that you're not putting the mask on your child's first, and all of a sudden you're out of the picture, and then everyone's in a bad place.
Yeah.
And so that's what the chameleon looks like. They're more of the people pleaser when it comes to focus. So they're focused on other people's stuff, even though they should be focused on maybe their big rock that they need to move. Yeah. And then last but not least, and a lot of people fall into this category in this day and age as well, because all the technology that helps push us in that direction, is that you're a squirrel. A squirrel's like next shiny object. Okay, so you're focused, you're amazing at starting things, kicking things off, you're super excited, but you're not the one that gets it across the finish line because you're looking at the next shiny object. And so it's really about understanding which animal you are. And most of us, I say, we major in one and minor in another. And so then it's understanding that as a an individual entrepreneur, it's important for you to know that. But also, if you do have teammates, it's trying to give folks that have those different strengths so that you surround yourself with the folks so you don't have all army ants at the company. And then, so I'm going to put you on the spot. So I'll go over them again. You got army ant, you got squirrel, you got chameleon, and then you also have hedgehog. Which one would you major in and which one would you minor in?
I think I definitely major in squirrel. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs do, but I have learned the discipline over the years to do my best not to be so squirrely. And I would say minor might be a chameleon, but I also see some similarities because I do often put people first. But see some parts of a minor in an army ant as well, with trying to do too much. But sometimes that's part of what a chameleon does too, like trying to please too many people, right? So
you can relate. We can relate to all four for sure. We all play them at some point.
Yeah. What are you?
I'm an army ant major and then squirrel minor.
Okay.
But what I've learned, I've gotten better at it, and it's a daily fight. So example, like as an army ant, right now it's crazy, but I have a young adult fiction book that's been done for 3 years.
Okay.
But when you map things out, everything we need to accomplish, it frustrates the heck out of me. But at best, that's going to launch next October. At best. And it's already been there for 4 years.
Yeah.
There's also, we want to possibly win a Grammy in music, but that window might be 6 years out.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, you can change that by possibly hiring more folks or taking that different level, but that's just a current. Before, I'd kind of have them all running simultaneously, and that just doesn't work, and the science proves that out. Again, do you, but that's one thing that I've been better at is, okay, because right now we've got this game that we're going to get out because we're an edutainment company.
Okay.
So all this stuff falls into edutainment. And so my kids love playing a certain card game that I made up. And so we're going to bring that to market.
Okay.
And so it's just like, if that allows families to have deeper moments rather than being on their devices, because I'm a digital guy, but I'm a lot of Flintstones too. So I want people to give breaks from their devices.
Yeah, 100%.
And so some of this stuff, you got to systematically map it out.
Yeah. How big is your team, Eric? You talked about them a bit. Like, what's the size of your team now?
No, I'm proud that it's small. This team's amazing. So my wife works full time, which we can talk about that, with the business, working with your spouse or partner. And then we have a full-time chief of staff. Mm-hmm. And then we have 3 part-timers. And then we always have 4 amazing interns that stay on for quite some time. And then most of them come from the University of Texas. During COVID, we've done more remote.
Nice.
Branched out, which is cool to deal with all these other universities. But that's what we have. And then we obviously engage with some folks some freelancers that are known that we use, especially on the animation side.
Yeah.
Through different tools, like your guys are probably familiar with, like Upwork. And
yeah.
So very, very lean, very, very lean. We're proud of that. Before, I'd kind of want my chest out. We've got 12 employees, because at one point we'd grow stuff and I go, wait, this isn't what we do best. It's actually better. You should be proud to have
fewer
amazing people and fewer people.
Or just the right ones, right?
Yeah.
I love that. Like, I love models that are few employees, but they do really well for, like, the companies do well for themselves. When I first realized it, I interviewed the founder of Squatty Potty, Bobby Edwards.
Oh, nice. I remember that from Shark Tank.
Yes, yeah. And he had, at the time, this is 2016 when we interviewed, 2017, he had 30, they think they did 35 million with 17 employees, all remote. And I thought that was just fascinating. Now I have a good friend. He does 1.5 million with one employee, basically an assistant, and all online. Everything can be run from his phone. And I think it's so beautiful because it's so frictionless to have a smaller team. You put the right people there that do what you need to get done. But to say, like, I hear people talk about, I've got 50 people or 30 people or 100 people in the company. I'm just like, that sounds like a lot of people to manage. Even if you have somebody managing all over that. Yeah. I was like, I like the 1.5 with one employee. Like, that sounds really nice,
Yep.
You having, 3 or 4 and then some interns, like, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And I'm somewhat conservative by nature. So it's, like, I'll buy my house and down the line, right? Just then I feel like I'm playing with house money.
Yeah.
But part of that, I learned that from Ralph Bartel, the founder and CEO of Travelzoo.
Okay.
Is that we would go to Wall Street and say, we make the most revenue per employee of any company on the NASDAQ. And they weren't used to hearing that number.
Wow.
And so we would back that out.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, so it's like I learned from him. I'm like, that's crazy. Yeah. And a lot of these Wall Street guys are like, what's that number? Like, and then they'd be like, wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. I'm curious about your internship program. I've had interns before. A lot of digital entrepreneurs do internships these days. A lot of students or aspiring entrepreneurs like to hop in and do an internship or a mentorship and learn more about the digital world. What kind of program do you have for your interns? How long have you been doing it? Where do you said University of Texas, which is here in Austin. Yeah. Details maybe more about the program you run.
Yeah, we've been doing it now 9 years.
Oh, it's a long time.
And we love it because we have the alums, so it's fun.
Okay.
And then what they've gone on, a lot of them started their own companies, or they work at Google or at Facebook,
nice.
Macy's, down the Pepsi. And so it's been fun. It's been fun to engage with just amazing, young, talented people. And usually we try to get them as sophomores, and so that they're on board sophomore, junior, senior year. And we've had a lot of success with them staying on, which helps with that continuity. And then over time, what we've learned too is we just have super defined roles. There's flexibility within those roles.
Okay.
But we actually give them real work, and it's a specific, rather than at the beginning we'd be like, yeah, we do this, fill your spot, do what you play to your talent. We found out it works better. Nope, you're specifically going to work on the podcast. Like, you are actually in charge of the podcast production.
Yeah.
And you're going to work closely with our amazing chief of staff that's going to work closely with you. And here's all the prior documentation that we use. We call them quick start guides.
Okay.
And so all the things that we do have quick start guides. So there's specific roles that they come in, and they usually have one big project that also has metrics. So we also have them report out on metrics, because it's important for interns to learn the P&L of companies, to understand that it's not just all fun and games, that you got to be moving the needle.
Right. I love that. What are some of the roles that you have, the interns? So you said podcast production. What are some of the other ones?
Other roles, Socialnomics. So they'll run the blog, work with the columnists, help with the posting, getting those up and live. Then we also have one that's in charge of social.
Okay.
So that helps a lot because whenever you do a social post, you have to resize it for everything.
Yeah.
There's different handles if I mention a handle. And so they'll help with all the nuances of getting those posts live.
Okay.
So it could be I take something, I go, hey, let's do a post around this. And then it goes out there. And we can talk about systems we use. We use Monday.com to manage all this. It's like Slack, but for small businesses.
Right.
And so those are 3 major roles that are always filled. Then we always have a rotating role depending. The 4th one's always just depending on what the business need is at the time.
Yeah.
It could be, occasionally we have them do outreach for keynotes, not too often because that doesn't usually work. That's usually more organic. But we look at their strength. So we've had a programmer in the past. So we go, hey, you're in charge of redoing the back end of the website and doing the SEO.
Okay.
So that 4th one's rotating based on this person's talented, what's their talent, and then put them on that part of the business.
And are they paid or unpaid internships, or how do you guys structure that?
Yeah, it's always structured to start off as a stipend.
Okay.
And so we found that works well because they really want to be here. It's not just, then they move to hourly from there. Usually, often, it depends.
Okay.
Often it depends on the macro environment and what works best for the individual and what the skill set is. But sometimes it's stipend, sometimes it's hourly. It depends on the macro environment.
And are you putting like an ad up for internships at the University of Texas, or how do you find them?
Yeah, we're really involved with, it could be through an association. So for all you listeners out there, it's get in with the association, the clubs and the association, making sure that you keep that string, which is hard because if you take your eye off the ball, you got to make sure you know the president, the student president, incoming, outgoing. So that's what we found the best is you can keep that chain, and you get great talent is usually connected to great talent.
Yeah.
And so you could keep that chain. And we've had even different family members work with us, which has been awesome.
Nice.
And so they know what they are getting into before they come here. And then we know usually what we're getting. They're not always the same, but it's just like the work ethic. So it's been great. But yeah, we'll post on Indeed. We've just got constantly running out there. But a lot of it's, and I always tell my chief of staff when I'm speaking in front of the class, like I give lectures at a lot of universities, I go, if you don't hear me tell them about the internship, like raise the red flag, like before I get done speaking, to remind them that we have these internship programs.
Nice. Very cool. I want to dive into some high performance talk and focus and productivity talk. And I know you have this book, The Focus Project, which I picked up at the airport, and I said, oh, that's a sign. I definitely need to get into that book before Eric comes on the podcast. But before we jump into that, Eric, is there anything about your business model that you think we missed, or we can, or that you should share with the listeners that we haven't touched on?
No, I think it's just basic. It gets back to the basics, which sometimes we weren't always good about, but I think actually working remote, we've been better about. We've been fortunate that we run a very high margin business.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of entrepreneurs, you just keep it in your head, and that's not a good thing to do. That's not a good way to do it. Mm-hmm. And so just have those metrics. I like to make 90% of us are visual learners. So what we do is we're always rowing to certain islands. And so we want to make sure there's millions of islands, there's like thousands of islands, right? But it's really the big islands that matter. And so when we look at our schematic, we're looking at usually 3 to 5 big islands for the year. Mm-hmm. And then we graphically fill those in. Is the island red, is meaning you're off target? Okay. Is it yellow, meaning you're probably on target, but there's a little concern? Or green, like you're crushing it. And so that's a way every week we actually, again, this isn't, you weren't doing that, but I think a lot of entrepreneurs, you're running so crazy all the time, you have to do everything.
Yeah.
That you forget to check in metrically with the team. And so that's what we do. Everyone has at least one metric. And again, we're looking at these big islands primarily. We're not going through every metric. Mm-hmm. We're just looking at the big islands. The simple, and I learned that from Alan Mulally. He was the CEO of Ford. So I shared the stage with him, and he did the same system, like stoplight system. And he told a funny story because we took over Ford, they're in dire straits. I mean, I think the stock was less than $2. Mm-hmm. and they start this system, and he comes in the meeting, everything's green. He's like, guys, it can't all be green. I mean, look at the stock. They brought me in because things aren't going well.
Right.
In the next meeting, someone finally had the guts to do red, and then he said they could finally have some progress. And so that's the only thing I'd just remind people, because I have to remind myself, you got to constantly be looking at your progress towards your goal. And I know that sounds like, why would you forget that? I mean, I'm a former athlete. It's like, you've got to, if you're going to run a marathon, not that I'm a runner, but if you're going to run a marathon, you got to track so you can make that 26.2 miles when you eventually get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially if we're part squirrels, then it's easy to get off track and focus on a new project or get excited about a new project, right?
Yep.
And we need those boundaries. One of the things moving into actually, real quick before we move into that, do you have a target on like how a number you want to keep your margins at? So like X amount of margins, if we go below that, we want to get back to that to stay in that high profit, high margin range?
We don't.
Okay.
And so it's just, most of the stuff we're in so high margin that it's just not, we're actually the upper, I'm very conservative.
Uh-huh.
And so we're finally playing, because the folks that we work with on the financial side for our taxes, like, you need more expenses. And so we're finally playing more offense in terms of, and it's really difficult for me, but playing more offense in terms of, hey, that's not an ROI, that's like a negative ROI.
Yeah.
And then sometimes in the bigger scheme of things, though, especially personal branding, you kind of have to take that hit. And so that's just a learned process for me, as well as, fortunately, over the years, we've built kind of that arsenal to where we can have that ability to do that.
Yeah.
But it's like, and then you get into the tax nuances, so you're really not losing as much money when you do that. So they're always like, you got to like increase the amount of expenditures you have.
You got to go back to the old Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Money in your pocket is an asset. Money out of your pocket is not an asset.
Right.
Do you mind sharing what your margins are?
I mean, you can think for a keynote speech, it's pretty high, right?
Sure, yeah.
I mean, you got to bake in all this stuff. There's an interesting article written many years ago in the Wall Street Journal, though, on why Malcolm Gladwell commands $100,000, because it's factoring all the time you put in the book. It's factoring in his travel time to that location, opportunity cost, on down the line. So some of the stuff's hard to actually pin, but that's the beauty of business. It's you a lot of times more living in the gray area.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, you can imagine most of the stuff's above 50%. Some of it's not. Like when you look at, say, I talk about getting this card game out the door, that's probably going to be more around, I'm guessing, 20%.
Okay. Yeah.
So depends on what business you're in.
Yeah. One thing that, in talking about accountability and percentages that you mentioned in your book that I thought was really great, and a statistic we should all be talking about if you're definitely talking about productivity and optimization and goal setting, and probably all entrepreneurs should know in one way or the other. You have percentages broken down. So if you have an idea or a goal, there's a 10% chance you'll accomplish it. Now, if you make a decision that you're going to do it, that percentage increases to 25% of success. Then you actually decide when you will do it. That increases to 50% chance of success at actually getting accomplished. And then you verbally commit to somebody that you will do it. Your odds of success increase to 65%. And then if you actually, and this is one of the most important ones that people so often forget, you schedule accountability check-ins, and that is a success rate of 95%. And I think that's thoroughly impressive because it's like, people so often ask themselves, why don't I accomplish this goal? Well, one, wasn't an idea in your head? Did you ever write it down on a piece of paper? And two, did you ever tell anybody and create some sort of system to help you accomplish that goal? And that's what so many people don't have out there, is a system to go rely back on to how to complete that goal.
No, it's so true. And it's funny because it's still a learned process for me, because sometimes, why don't we verbalize our goals?
Yeah.
Because then it becomes real.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, if you don't verbalize it, then you never failed.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And once you verbalize it, but the beautiful thing is you're not going to get there unless you verbalize it. You just aren't.
Yeah.
And so it's a learned I always flip through the book myself because there's a lot of stuff we pulled that I was struggling with in terms of focus. And so it just kind of gets me back on the rails, which inertia, the life's going to pull you off those rails. And so it's like, I always go back to some of the items. And I love that you brought that up just around that goal setting. Just intuitively, it makes sense. Then the numbers back it up.
Yeah.
And I mean, even going back to college. So like I was cut from my basketball team as a junior in high school. And I got to Michigan State, which is top 10 in basketball. But I still had this dream of playing college basketball, which seemed ridiculous. Like to play at Michigan State when you're a freshman. And the epiphany was I kept dreaming about it at night, and then I had 1 year left. People don't realize this. They always say I have 4 years eligibility. You don't. Once you start school, your eligibility starts ticking, whether you play a sport or not. People don't know that.
Yeah.
And so I'm going, I got 1 year left. I haven't told anybody this laughable goal because it's ridiculous. But I started to see, I think I can make the team. Well, I started to see the other players, the 13 that were there. And so I finally told people, and there's people that laughed. And then there's other people that are like, all of a sudden they become your support network. They're like, why aren't you in the gym? You know, you got to put on 30 pounds. All right, you got to do this, blah, blah, blah. And so they held you accountable to your point. And so even learning that on his early age, that gravity pulls us away from that. So there's probably dreams for all of our listeners out there that you haven't verbalized it. So if you take anything away from today, take that big dream you have and just tell one person. And then that's often that little step that gets that ball rolling down the hill. So hopefully that's the one thing you do today is you all have that dream in there that you haven't told a soul. You've only told yourself. And so go tell someone.
Yeah. I love that. Your goal is not a goal until you tell somebody else. Like there's no, I love that a lot. You also mentioned here something that I thought was really cool, focus foods. And we can dissect that some more because so often people get wrapped up in different, diets and they're I've got to have 65 coffees in a day and in order to operate, or, they're sporadic, or on the weekends, maybe it's pizza, or maybe not even follow a diet whatsoever. They want to enjoy, or say they want to enjoy life with whatever food they want to eat. But there really are, like I'm big into neuroscience and performance optimization. I have a brain scanner, a high-end brain scanner that we use to measure our clients and people in our masterminds, their brain health on a regular basis, so we can optimize their brain levels. So often it's very much connected to diets, foods, supplementation, and then balance of exercise and work, right? In life. So your focus foods you mentioned in the book was avocados, which are amazing. I'm at 2 avocados a day. I got my avocado smoothie in the morning and then pop it in a salad in the evening. Blueberries, which are great. Got a lot of good nutrients in blueberries. Green tea. I use the Brain Boost green tea. I'm drinking it right now, actually, from Superfoods. I think it's one of the best green teas. And from what I've read, and maybe you can back this, Eric, but the only good green tea is really an organic green tea. The ones that come from, in a big box of, 50 of them for a cheaper price from China, quite often aren't that great of a green tea. Then you have leafy greens, fatty fish. Of course, you need your omega-3s. Water, and I don't think people realize how important water is for productivity and focus on a regular basis. Flaxseed, nuts, coffee, depending on the person. Eggs are great. Beets are amazing. And then you mentioned dark chocolate as well, which I think releases some endorphins, but not the unhealthy chocolate or the healthier chocolate. What type of diet do you mix? Is this like your regular diet on a daily basis? Because that's pretty much everything I eat right there. I don't think I add anything else except maybe a protein bar from time to time. What's your diet like?
Yeah, I mean, when I travel, I'm definitely like anyone susceptible to slide. And I've got young kids that are eating ice cream all the time. So sometimes, but it's really most of the time pretty good. I'll take weeks sometimes where I'm just like, all right, this week, just relax. Just you're on vacation with the kids.
Yeah.
But it's consistently fairly strict. And I like it over time. Like that's what I enjoy. I actually like the taste. Healthy food, if you do it right, actually has most amazing tastes. I was just up in Michigan to where middle of nowhere, upper north. If you ever taste like a fresh apple, organic from the tree, the taste is just mind blowing. And so that's a whole nother podcast. We can get into it. There's more experts on food. I definitely recommend reading The Pegan Diet. That's a great book. The Pegan Diet.
Pegan.
Yeah,
okay.
Pegan Diet.
Okay.
That's a great book. And
what is that diet?
Water.
I haven't
What's
heard
that,
of
sorry?
I haven't heard of that diet before. What is that?
It's basically taking paleo and vegan and combining them.
Got it. Okay. Got it. Okay.
And it's really just what you think. I'll give you the 30 seconds on it. Eat whole foods. Lean meats are actually good for you.
Yeah.
And so eat whole foods and lean meats and you're good. Organically, the good thing is I didn't know this, you can Google Dirty Dozen. So every year they come out with what are the dirtiest, because organic's expensive. Or if you buy these eggs, like if you take a regular egg and crack the regular egg, meaning like $1.30 for a carton, just like, okay, name your store, Kroger, H-E-B, Publix, whatever.
Yeah.
And you crack that egg, because when you, anyways, I'll get into that. When I traveled to Europe, I was always like, why are their eggs orange? Like the yolk, why is the yolk orange? This is weird. And then I realized, because in America, everything's got all these steroids and these different chemicals in it. So if you go by the pasture raised, so it's not free, we won't get into too much of this, but if you just like get the pasture raised, that means they're letting the chickens eat the insects. They're just in their natural environment.
Right.
It's going to be expensive. A carton of those like $6.
Yeah.
Where the other eggs are $1.30. But if you crack both those eggs, the pasture raised are literally orange and the other one's like a light yellow. You'll see the difference.
Yeah.
But anyways, the reason I brought up the Dirty Dozen, because some of us just can't afford to eat organic. It's expensive. So you got to pick and choose which are the most important. So you look at the list, it'll say strawberries are very dirty. So that's one you probably want to buy organic. Whereas something else like banana, you're probably pretty good. Just buy the regular bananas.
Okay.
And so they come out this list every year, the Dirty Dozen. So you just Google it for the organic food. So you can pick and choose which one, when you have the capability, if you're going to kind of spend more money, okay, it's more important to spend it on this particular food because that has more pesticides, chemicals in it if I don't get it that way. So
that makes sense.
But the reason it's in the book is because most of us attack sports. We know we have to eat healthy and train a certain way, but you got to think about it the same way, like as, a mathlete, or you go into the office. It's like, how do I increase my focus? A lot of it's back to diet. Just even you mentioned water. A lot of times when you feel tired, it's just you're dehydrated.
Yeah.
If you drink a bunch of water, all of a sudden your energy increases.
Yeah. They have yoga in the park here in Austin, and I was at yoga in the park on Tuesday, and they have free rainwater, but it's been, filtered, of course, and made potable. And it tasted so fantastic. I was like, this is real water. This is what it's supposed to taste like. Like there was a noticeable difference in the quality of water. And I had a jug full of water as well. And that water was just like, wow, like just really, really fascinating. I'll tell you another trick with the eggs as well. If you poach an egg and put it in boiling water, the eggs that a lot of times it's hard to keep it, the whites and together because it just like goes all over the place. That is a bad egg with a lot of chemicals in it, and normally from a corn-fed chicken. So when you have the organic grass-fed free-range chickens, when you put those eggs in the boiling water, the whites will stay together. And
interesting.
The more they stay together, the better the egg, the higher quality of the egg.
I'll have to do that. That's pretty cool. And then last but not least, because I think this is really important because it's like a life hack. It just happens to relate to food. But in the Focus Project, the book, I always say, figure out what's going to work for you that allows you to focus on the important things. And so we get into like Steve Jobs, the reason he wore a black shirt is because there's one less decision, because you have decision fatigue. Mark Zuckerberg does the same thing. And so your brain's just like your phone, over the course of the day, it gets tired. And so it's important to attack first things first, the most important things when your brain's at its optimal. And it's also important, if you can, figure out hacks to where it requires less decision making. So you can save that brain power for the important decisions. Now, this doesn't work for everyone, but it happens to work really well for me. Is that, again, something happened for me, not to me. I used to cook egg whites, scramble them up. And one day I left it on the stove too long, and I come over, I'm like, oh my gosh, these eggs are going to be burning. And it formed, basically it hardened the whole thing in a small pan. And I flipped it over, and hence frittata. Of like, wow, egg white frittata. A, this is way easier to cook. B, it's way easier to clean. And C, it tastes better. So all of a sudden I have this win from a mistake. And so I did it for the focus project, but now I just do it because I like it. I usually eat breakfast, but it's really, I'll do it after this talk. I usually do it around 11:30 because, I want to eat in those windows, 18, whatever you do, intermittent fasting. We talk about that in the book as well. But so I eat the same thing basically at 11 o'clock every day, like avocado, arugula, tomato, lean turkey, and an egg white frittata.
Yeah.
And it's just one less decision. It's just systematic. And I always have that stuff in my fridge. So when I buy groceries, it just makes everything else easier. So again, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It's just, how do you find those life hacks to limit your decision making on the little things? It also just make your life easier.
Love it, man. I love it. Do you have a favorite life hack, high performance tip, high performance hack that you're working on right now?
I'd say the biggest learning I had, and this isn't anything new, it's just, this goes back thousands of years when you look at the research. And that's what I was trying to pull together. What's worked for, hundreds of years, and what's kind of new with the digital era, because I'm a digital person, and marry those two. So this isn't anything new, but it's the most powerful thing for me, is just like always asking, what's the one thing, if I do it well, it makes everything else either easier or unnecessary. There's a lot of books written. The One Thing by Jay Papasan and Gary Keller, also Austonians, is great. They do a whole book on that. But it's really about just always reminding myself, what am I doing right now and why am I doing it? And so just being more present and intentional. You think about that more in terms of yoga, but it's actually very critical for business. Just pausing throughout the day. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? It's the one thing that I should be doing to make everything else either easier or unnecessary. And so that's kind of what I'm always going back to throughout the course of the day. And I'm not perfect at it. It's always a learned process. You think that's easy. You hear it once. Why can't you do it? It's like what Tony Robbins says is like, it's not knowledge. People know if you want to get in good shape, you got to eat better and exercise more. It's actually the execution.
Yeah, that's amazing. Eric, I think that's a fantastic way to wrap up the podcast. You've given us so much knowledge and wealth and experience and tips. I really appreciate it. Any final words for the listeners before we wrap up?
Yeah, just step into your story. It'll be uncomfortable. Step into that biggest chapter of your life. And part of the easiest step, tactical way to do that right now, I want all of you to do this. That thing that you're dreaming about in your head, just verbalize it to one person. Go, this is my dream. This is what I want to do. And once you do that, it's daunting because now you're going to have to do it. But I look forward to you doing it. Definitely send me a note. Please send me a note if you did that. And then 6 months, a year from now when you accomplish it, I'd love to hear from you.
Love that, Eric. If the listeners want to reach out and learn more about what you have going on, where's the best place they can do that at?
I'm easy to reach. It's easy to remember. It's just Equalman across the board. So feel free, Equalman at equalman.com or equalman.com. However you want to reach me, it's Equalman at social. Whatever your favorite mode of communication is, if I can help you, don't hesitate to reach out.
Perfect. Eric, again, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all your tips and tricks and wisdom with us. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it.
And listeners, we're going to wrap up there. Thank you guys for tuning in once again, and we'll see you on the next episode. Goodbye, everybody.